Oh hey guys, I just wanted to drop in with my new vlogging setup. Yeah, 6K full frame cinema camera, filming in RAW. Look, it might be a little bit bulky, but I really appreciate the extra weight. It means you don't get so many micro jitters. Anyway, this new autofocus is pretty good, so I think I'm gonna just start vlogging with this from now on.
I'm here to test every single Blackmagic autofocus feature in depth and let you know what's working, what isn't, and whether it's worth getting excited about. Spoiler alert, it's worth getting excited about. Blackmagic had many announcements at NAB this year, and the biggest announcement of all had nothing to do with the Pixis 12K. No, it was Grant Petty, just casually, just modestly, just by the by, announcing the introduction of autofocus to Blackmagic cameras.
So that'd be pretty cool.
This is how you announce a revolutionary leap forward in your camera features? A potential camera zeitgeist moment that could create a paradigm shift in the entire industry? I'm sorry, Grant Petty, I was not familiar with your game.
I think that's nice. So that's pretty cool.
This new autofocus is a mixture of AI and phase detection autofocus, something the Blackmagic engineer alluded to being a long-term game plan that they have been working on for years. What other camera company would ever drop autofocus out of nowhere on a 2-year-old cinema camera they're not even trying to really sell anymore? I mean, there is levels to this. The first Blackmagic to get the autofocus isn't the Pixis 6K or 12K. It's the good old faithful cinema camera 6K full frame. Now, who has two thumbs, didn't upgrade to the Pixis, and therefore now has autofocus in his Blackmagic camera? This guy. Us prescient 6K Cine full frame owners now have access to the beta update, while all the other Pixis owners, they just got beta cucked. But I'm not here to gloat. In fact, I'm using Blackmagic autofocus right now. Just kidding, I'm not filming my talking head with a kit lens. I'm an occasional part-time professional YouTuber. I'm not defiling my image with a kit lens. Now onto the testing, which I did have to do with the kit lens. The Panasonic 20 to 60mm lens, because this is the only L-mount Panasonic lens with autofocus I currently own. I tried to film through the different focal ranges of this zoom to see if this made a difference in the autofocus performance. But because this is a 3.5 to 5.6 lens, it means that the focus will theoretically have an easier time managing with a less shallow depth of field. To activate autofocus, you need to download the latest camera firmware update from the Blackmagic support page, connect your 6K full frame via USB to your computer, and after the new update, when the camera reboots, just swipe through the setup menu and then select the PDAF autofocus. Now, when you swipe the edge of the screen, your autofocus controls will appear where you can pick from single autofocus, autofocus continuous, object detect autofocus, and facial recognition autofocus. The first test was inside, going through all the different focal ranges using the face detection settings first and then object detection. First we tried with 60mm, the tightest focal length. Now it's important to watch the little framing box around me, as this shows whenever it loses focus and the result of that loss. So it's normally blue when it is tracking me. So you're seeing what the LCD screen is seeing and the raw 6K footage in real time. Now overall, I was very impressed with face detect or facial recognition autofocus. When I switched to object detect, it was much less reliable in this environment and would definitely lose the object more quickly. What you should also be looking for is the dreaded autofocus pulsing. Nothing says bad autofocus like that pulsing effect, which is such a sort of early autofocus issue. But generally, this all seemed pretty smooth most of the time. Then I moved to an outside test in a more contrasty, less controlled lighting environment. Now in these tests, I would just walk up to and walk away from the camera at different speeds using the face detect autofocus. And I'll be honest, a lot of the time this worked shockingly well. Like, I almost couldn't believe how well it was working here a lot of the time. It would find my face again after I moved out of frame. It would track me as I moved back and forward pretty well without any of this autofocus pulsing. Now, what I did mainly notice is when I was doing this at 20mm with the wider angle of the lens, the autofocus would lose me more quickly. And when I moved quicker, it's almost like I would sort of jog myself out of the focus as the box would lose me as I started to move. It would also sometimes lose me when I was sort of at the furthest point away from the camera. And this is where we'd see some of that nasty pulsing effect when I'm at the furthest distance away. Now, what I found is that whenever you lose face tracking, you have to reset it by toggling to another focus mode and then back again. It doesn't often re-find the face it was locked onto until you reset it. So there's some work to do here. However, when I punched into the 60mm and the focus then suddenly became almost flawless. It stopped losing me even when I was far away, and moving quickly, it would keep me pretty well focused throughout the range without that same pulsing. This was a huge shock to me. To be honest, as I was running this test, the performance was feeling very similar to the DJI Focus Pro without all that rigging and setting up. But I was also getting these nice smooth focus transitions with the longer end of the lens without any pulsing, and it just was really surprising. I then tried to use my dog Oscar as an object, and it constantly lost focus on him. It clearly doesn't like your object being a certain shape, so this was like a big fail. But then I tried again using face tracking, and yes, it detected Oscar's face. And to be fair, what AI model wouldn't track that cute little doggo? But not only did it track, it pretty much stayed locked on as I moved around him doing some of the worst camera work possible. It didn't lose him at all. Now, I don't need to tell you how difficult this would be to manually focus in the same way. And this had me super excited. I mean, this is beta focusing. This is more or less experimental, and it isn't missing. I then moved into the studio. Now, I just wanted to run a quick YouTuber test, a talking head test to see if anything weird would happen in the traditional piece to camera setup, like would it just start hunting or pulsing or anything like that. Primarily, I was really interested in hands and whether having them in frame or by the mic would cause issues. I mean, remember just how over a year ago when Panasonic cameras would just start locking on to people's hands instead of their faces, that was in Panasonic's best focusing cameras. Well, there are no such problems here. The hands didn't cause any issues for me at all. Then I ran another object detect autofocus with this bull, and as you can see, the results were not ideal, but that was until I shifted the camera down and I kept less of me in frame, and then I was able to track the bull much better, even when it was only half in frame. So it's a little difficult to know what to make of that. I mean, does it get confused when there's more human elements by the object it's meant to track? Then I moved into continuous autofocus, the focus going from 3 different objects by tapping the screen. In continuous autofocus, this really didn't work very well. Every time I shifted focus, the focus would hunt, it would pulse, then it would find its focus again. It was not good at all. And it definitely seems to struggle with an object if that object is the wrong kind of shape. Like, look at it struggling to focus on this piece of gaffer tape here. Now look at it when I swapped the tape for a Rode video mic instead. But when I shifted to single point autofocus, this worked a lot more smoothly and there was much less of the issues you could see when set to autofocus continuous. So if you just want to do smooth pull focuses between your background and foreground, then the single point autofocus is the best setting, but it's still not perfect. So what's the verdict here? I'm absolutely blown away by how well face detect autofocus worked in a lot of scenarios. The other settings, well, they all need more work, but this is super encouraging. Also, does this update make the 6K full frame the greatest YouTube studio camera of all time? I mean, no more finding your focus manually, just chuck on autofocus and get that crispy 6K full frame goodness. And what about for gimbal work? This is going to make gimbal work on the 6K just so much easier. In fact, I think for people thinking about which version of, say, the Blackmagic Pixis to get, last week I would have said, hey, get the PL mount if you're planning to just use this as a cinema camera. But now I would say get the L mount and have the option to use this autofocus option when you need to. The only question mark for me personally is, how does this autofocus system work with like third-party lenses? I mean, technically all lenses are third-party for this camera, but will this perform as well with Sigma glass, for example? At lower f-stops, will this still be fine? And that is all yet to be determined for me. So just temper your expectations. You've seen my results. Don't go thinking you need to go all in on Blackmagic autofocus systems just yet. But on the same token, how much does this new feature increase the value of the Blackmagic 6K full frame for shooters? I mean, this dusty old forgotten about Blackmagic camera everyone traded in for the Pixis now has a totally new lease on life, one that could allow you to film with it in many new and totally different exciting ways. What a win for Blackmagic. What a win for 6K full frame owners. And it's also important to note, we don't exactly know when the Pixis or the Pixis 12K will be getting the update. So banking on one of those cameras having autofocus really soon might actually be a little presumptuous. If you want this feature, either utilize the 6K full frame or wait until we have a concrete time for when updates are coming to those other cameras. And let's just check our expectations. This is the beta version of the software. It will only get better from here, and it's already good enough that I'm going to be investing in 2 new L-mount autofocusing lenses just to leverage this feature on my Blackmagic. I would suggest that this face detect feature of the autofocus is actually working better than the old Panasonic contrast-based face detect autofocus on the S5s, and this is the experimental version of this system. Where will we be after another year of updates? The reason I personally suffer through my experience as a Sony shooter navigating the Oompa Loompa skin tones and hyperclinical sharpness is its brilliant autofocus. And if Blackmagic can get even within striking distance of Canon or Sony autofocus, then what do those companies and their cameras have that Blackmagic doesn't? I mean, image stabilization. Have you ever used gyro stabilization on the Blackmagic cameras? It's just as effective. It's like one by one, Blackmagic are now finally ticking off each of their shortcomings. Remember, when we just talk about image, just pure image quality, Blackmagic are already, in my opinion, ahead of the game. So if they were to bring in this image quality along with comparable autofocus, then they're kind of going to be unstoppable. If you think this new development won't concern the big boys like Sony and Canon, well, then I have an original red Komodo to sell you, if you catch my drift. Blackmagic said they wanted feedback on this new feature and people's opinions on how it's been integrated so far. My feedback as Blackmagic's premier fuckboy? It's working! It's working! Just keep going. This is great. As always, I am the Savage filmmaker, and I'll see you when I see you.